So welcome back, part two here. If you recall, we just left off with Victor and he's figured out how to bring inanimate things to life. So for example, he could inject this marker with whatever he believes to be a life force and it would come alive and it could do all kinds of wonderful things. And remember, he says to Walton, I'm not a madman, I'm not crazy. Check it out, I can do these things. So now whether he shares that secret with Walton or not, we'll find out. Continuing then, where I left off in chapter 4. The astonishment which I had at first experienced on this discovery soon gave place to delight and rapture. After so much time spent in painful labor, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consummation of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliterated, and I beheld only the result. What had been the study and desire of the wisest men since the creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that like a magic scene it had all opened upon me at once. The information I had obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavors so soon as I should point them toward the object of my search, than to exhibit that object already accomplished. I was like the Arabian who had been buried with the dead and found a passage to life, aided only by one glimmering and seemingly ineffectual light. I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. He's talking to Walton. And to us as an audience, what is the secret? How do we go about doing what he has discovered? That cannot be. Listen patiently until the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent as I then was, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example. Next line here, very, very important. How dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. Think about that for a moment, I want you to, in your notebooks, write down, and if you want some extra credit, comments section. You got questions for me, things like that on this YouTube channel, put your questions. I'll try to respond to them, or other people might respond to them. But that's a key line, right? It's better. Some things are better not to know. Be happy with where you are. Learn from me. You don't want this destruction. What he found out destroyed him. When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it, right? Just because we can doesn't mean we should. We figure out how to do things like CRISPR and other things, and nuclear energy. And what should we do with those things? What is our responsibility? Although I possess the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it, with all its intricacies of fibers, muscles, and veins, still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labor. I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of a being like myself, or one of simpler organization. But my imagination was too much exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. He's going to try and make a human. No, not to bring a human to life, but to make a human. Wow. The materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate to so arduous an undertaking, but I doubted not that I should ultimately succeed. I prepared myself for a multitude of reverses. My operations might be incessantly baffled, and at last my work be imperfect. Yet when I considered the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at least lay the foundations of future success. So even if he fails, he's preparing the groundwork for people to build upon. The shoulders of giants, a conversation which could be continued. He will be the one that starts it. nor could I consider the magnitude and complexity of my plan as any argument of its impracticability. In other words, he thought out, I must do it. I have to make a human. There's no reason not to. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being. Right there is what he makes a human. Huh? He's setting about, what's he setting about to be? A God. As the minuteness of the parts formed a great hindrance to my speed, I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of a gigantic stature, that is to say, about 8 feet in height and proportionately large. After having formed this determination and having spent some months in successfully collecting and arranging my materials, I began. So, he's not making somebody the same size as a human because it's too hard, it's too small. It's easier to build on a larger scale. Remember, people sometimes are like, oh, where did he find human parts that were that big? He doesn't. Remember, he's taking the tissue and putting it together, and then he's going to animate life into it. So he doesn't have to find a bone that's this long. He's going to make a bone that's that long, or however he goes about it. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards. Like a hurricane, in the first enthusiasm of success, life and death appeared to me ideal bounds. He has no limits. Nothing's sacred. Which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. His motive is to be a god, right? A species that will bless him. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. So he did try. He says right there, he found it's impossible. He did try to bring dead people to life. He did. It doesn't say I thought about it. He says he actually tried. And it's impossible. At least, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It couldn't happen. Just as far as he went, it was impossible. These thoughts supported my spirits while I pursued my undertaking with unremitting ardor. My cheek had grown pale with study, and my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes on the very brink of certainty, I failed, yet I still clung to the hope which the next day or the next hour might realize. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I had dedicated myself. And the moon gazed on my midnight labors, while with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness I pursued nature to her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave, or tortured the living animal to animate lifeless clay? So he is doing immoral things. He's taking flesh from graves and things like that. Here's the secret. Look at that line, Or tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay. How does he bring these things to life? The life spirit of a living organism. He tortures the life spirit out and puts it into something else. There's his secret. My limbs now trembled and my eyes swam with the remembrance. But then a restlessness and almost frantic impulse urged me forward. I seemed to have lost all soul or sensation but for one pursuit. It was indeed but a passing trance that only made me feel with renewed acuteness so soon as, the unnatural stimulus ceasing to operate, I had returned to my old habits. I collected bones from carnal houses and distributed with profane fingers the tremendous secrets of the human frame, in a solitary chamber, or rather cell, at the top of the house, and separated from all the other apartments by a gallery and staircase. I kept my workshop a filthy creation. My eyeballs were starting from their sockets in attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation. While still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased, I brought my work near to a conclusion. He's gone mad. He's gone mad. He's working day and night. He doesn't even eat to try and bring this thing to life. It's become his one pursuit. The summer months passed while I was thus engaged, heart and soul, in one pursuit. It was a most beautiful season. Never did the fields bestow a more plentiful harvest, or the vines yield a more luxuriant vintage. But my eyes were insensible to the charms of nature, and the same feelings which made me neglect the scenes around me caused me to forget those friends who were so many miles absent, and whom I had not seen for so long a time. I knew my silence disquieted them, and I well remembered the words of my father. I know that while you are pleased with yourself, you will think of us with affection, and we shall hear regularly from you. You must pardon me if I regard any interruption in your correspondence as a proof that your other duties are equally neglected. I knew well, therefore, what would be my father's feelings, but I could not tear my thoughts from my employment, loathsome in itself, but which had taken an irresistible hold of my imagination. I wished, as it were, to procrastinate all that related to my feelings of affection until the great object, which swallowed up every habit of my nature, should be completed. I then thought that my father would be unjust if he ascribed my neglect to vice or faultiness on my part. But I am now convinced that he was justified in conceiving that I should not be altogether free from blame. A human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb his tranquility. Key line there, those imperfect, keep things balanced, right? He even recognizes he is not being perfect. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If you study to which you apply yourself has tendency to weaken your affection or destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful, right? That is an important line for all of us. If what we focus on takes us away from the other things in life, then that thing is unlawful. That is to say, not befitting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections, Greece had not been enslaved, Caesar would have spared his country, America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. Wow, Mary Shelley, political commentary there. But I forget that I am moralizing in the most interesting part of my tale, and your looks remind me to proceed. My father made no reproach in his letters, and only took notice that my silence by inquiring into my occupations more particularly than before. Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labors, but I did not watch the blossom or the expanding leaves, sights which before always yielded me supreme delight, was so deeply I was engrossed in my occupation. The leaves of that year had withered before my work drew near to a close, and now every day showed me more plainly how well I had succeeded. But my enthusiasm was checked by my anxiety, and I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines, or any other unwholesome trade, than an artist occupied by his favorite employment. Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I became nervous to a most painful degree. The fall of a leaf startled me, and I shunned my fellow creatures, as if I had been guilty of a crime. Yes, he is. Sometimes I grew alarmed at the wreck I perceived that I had become. The energy of my purpose alone sustained me. My labors would soon end, and I believed that exercise and amusement would then drive away incipient disease. I promised myself both of these when my creation should be complete. The end of chapter 4. And chapter 5 soon to follow.